welcome to this tutorial. We're going to overview the Easy Login feature, which allows you to make the registration, login, and password recovery processes easier and quicker, improving user experience and reducing cart abandonment rate in your e-commerce store. Let's get started.
First, let's see how this feature works. I'm in the cart. I've already added the product I want to buy, and now I'm going to click Proceed to Checkout. And I get this pop-up where I can enter my email address to either log in if I have an account or register if I don't. I can proceed as a guest because guest checkout is enabled in the shop, or log in with Facebook or Google. If I choose any of these, I'll get another pop-up to connect to my account on either one of these platforms. So, as you can see, customers can log in or register very quickly within the purchase process without leaving the page they're on. Now let's see how you can configure this feature. Let's go to the panel, and you'll find these sections with options to configure. First, let's go through the general settings. Here you can set the pop-up size in pixels. You can choose to close the pop-up by clicking on the background and not just on the close icon. You can choose to blur the background, set the pop-up animations. Right now they're fade in and fade out, but you can choose to either have no animations at all or choose one of all these animations you have here for the entrance and the exit. And in case you don't want to use the default close icon, you can upload a different one here or enter the link to it. Let's see all this in the pop-up again. Okay, so first we have the fading animation. The background is blurred. That's another one of the options we saw. And right now we have the default close icon. We can click here to close the pop-up, but you can also enable the option to have it closed by just clicking on the background. And let's see the fade out animation. And there we go. Let's go back. Now let's move on to steps options. Here's where you can configure the first step, login, register, and lost password screens. In the first step tab, you can configure the text we just saw on the pop-up. We have the header, the title, the user input label, and the button text. Let's see that again. There we go. We can find the text here. Back. You can also allow usernames to log in and not just email addresses. You can enter a custom text to show before the form. And here you have the social login options. So here's where you can enable and configure Facebook and Google logins. For Facebook, you'll have to add the app ID. In case you don't know where to find it, you can click here to get more information. You'll need to enter the app secret, and you'll be able to configure the button text. Choose if you want to use the default Facebook icon or upload a custom one. And you'll also be able to configure the button colors. And for Google, we have similar options. You'll have to enter your Google Client ID. If you don't know where to find it, you can click here to see that. You'll be able to enter the button text, set the icon, and the colors. Okay, so now let's move on to login. So this will be the second step if the user already has an account on your website and they enter their email address or username if you allow it in this first step. So this will be the second screen in the pop-up where they can enter the password. Again, you can edit the header text, the pop-up title. In this case, you have the username placeholder, so you can use the current username to greet them. You can enter custom text, set the password input label, and here you can set the text for the stay sign-in option. And right here, you could make the option checked by default. And last, the button label to finally sign in after entering the password. Now, in Register, you can configure the second step users will see if they enter an invalid username or email address and they haven't registered yet. They will see a register form in the pop-up as a second step, so they won't need to leave the page they're on. Again, you can set the header text, the title, a custom text. You can use the blog name placeholder for the site name. You can set the password input label. You can enable the option to have them repeat the password to make sure they don't make any mistakes. You can enable an additional password strength check. You can add a privacy policy checkbox, and this will be the text for that checkbox. Right now it's I have read and accepted your terms and privacy policy. Both of these are placeholders, as you can see here, for the terms and conditions and privacy policy. You can have that checkbox checked by default by enabling this option, and you can also edit the text of the button to register the account and have the user proceed to checkout. Below you'll find Google reCAPTCHA options. You can enable this to have an extra verification in the form. You'll just need to enter the reCAPTCHA public and private keys. And last, in lost password, you can set up the options to guide users through the password recovery step. They will see this if they enter a valid email or username, but then when they're in the login step, they click on Forgot Your Password. Again, you can edit the header text, the title. You can enter custom text here. You can set the user input label. You can enable this option to have the email field automatically populated with the email address the user entered in the first step. And you can edit the button text. In this case, it says send code. This is because the recovery password type here is with code. So it makes sense for me to have this as the button text. But keep in mind that you have two options. So you can either manage this process with code and automatically send a code by email to your users so they can set a new password without leaving the checkout process. Or you can have the classic mode where they will receive an email with a link that will redirect them to the website to reset the password. If you select this option, you'll find authentication options to set the pop-up title, a custom text before the code field, the code label. You'll be able to enable an option to allow the user to request a new code. Here's the label for that and the button text. And you'll also see this section to configure the set a new password options, all within the same pop-up. You can set the title, a custom text, the label. You'll be able to enable the option to repeat the password to make sure they don't make any mistakes. And you can also edit the button text. If you happen to choose classic instead of with code, you'll be able to enter the pop-up title, set the custom text, and the recent label and button text. Now let's move on to additional pop-up. As we've seen so far, the pop-up will appear when a user that's not logged in clicks on proceed to checkout. But in this section, you can configure additional pop-ups that can appear when users click on other elements on the website. You would just need to enter the ID or class here. The element could be a link in the menu or a widget like the card widget. You can very easily do that by just inspecting the element on your website, copying the ID or class, and then adding it here, preceded by a hashtag if it's an ID or a dot if it's a class. In case you already have elements here, you can just add a comma and a space to separate the elements. And here you can set the pop-up title when it's triggered by these elements, the register button text, and the save password button in the recovery password step. Now let's move on to customization. Here's where you can customize the colors for the pop-up and the buttons. And that's it. That's how easy it is to configure this feature and have your users log in, register, or recover their passwords in just a few steps.
Okay, so that's how you can configure and use this feature. See you soon in the next video tutorial.